On this super review, let's take a look at the BenQ treVolo S electrostatic Bluetooth speaker. All right, what you're looking at here is a Bluetooth speaker from the company BenQ, which they're known for making, high-end gaming monitors, or at least that's what I kind of know them for. So yeah, they've made a Bluetooth speaker, and frankly, this thing is heavy. Okay, what makes the treVolo S especially unique is this is not just an ordinary Bluetooth speaker. This is in fact an electrostatic speaker. And electrostatic is just a different way of producing sound versus typical dynamic drivers that you would get in a typical speaker. So this thing's making sound with a unique technology that you can get in some really high-end headphones. And in fact, I think this definitely qualifies as a high-end Bluetooth speaker because this thing rings in at 200 bucks. Is this thing gonna sound like 200 bucks? I don't know. Let's go ahead and open it up. We'll find out what you get inside the box of the treVolo S. And then I'll give it a listening test, run it against my own reference library of music. But also BenQ, they actually sent me their own music to sample, so I'll sample some of that stuff, but really I'm interested to hear how this thing sounds with my own music. So again, let's go ahead and open it up. We'll find out what we get inside the box, and then I'll come back and I'll let you know what do I think. All right, we got the BenQ treVolo S sitting here inside a box, and let's do a quick tour about this thing. Quick tour of the box to see what we can find out about this thing. All right, so on the side here, we just got a picture of it that shows what this thing looks like fully expanded. So you see here on the front of the box, this is what this thing looks like folded up. But interestingly, this thing, the speakers pop out from the sides to give you a really large surface area for those electrostatic tweeters. Not much else here. Up here, nothing. Over here, oh, we got a little bit of information. So we know that it's got Bluetooth. We know that it's got some 3D mode in it. I don't think I'm particularly interested in that, but it's there. It does have NFC for easy pairing. That said, look, does anyone out there actually like NFC? Every time I've tried using it, and maybe I'm defective, I don't know. But every time I've tried using NFC, it's been way more difficult than just using regular Bluetooth. Here it claims that they've got 18 hours of battery life with continuous play, which is pretty good. Look, this is a heavy Bluetooth speaker. I don't know how, frankly, I don't know how likely I am to take this thing around with me. But it is nice that it's got 18 hours of battery life built into this unit. Support for 16-bit digital audio via micro USB. And it's got non-distorted 3D audio. That's okay. That's just a claim around here in the back. A little bit of technical specs, but really not much about the unit itself. So let's go ahead and open it up. We'll find out what we get inside the box of the treVolo S. All right, so we got the treVolo S out of the box, and what do you get? Of course, you get some paperwork, and this is a pretty thick manual. I'm hoping it's as simple as being a Bluetooth speaker, but we'll find out. You do get a power cord, of course, but worth pointing out is that this thing is just micro USB, so ostensibly you could power this thing off of any micro USB. You do get a nice little carrying pouch, and when I took this thing out of the box for the first time, I was actually kind of surprised at how small this pouch was, because given the weight of this thing, I expected it to be a lot larger than something that would fit in this pouch, but, well, you get to the unit here, and you see that when it's folded up, it's actually pretty compact. I don't know, what would you compare that to? Let's see, here's my iPhone XR for comparison. It's bigger than the iPhone XR, obviously a lot thicker than the XR, but the footprint is actually fairly similar, and that's surprising, because like I said, this thing has got some weight to it. It does also feel like it's built pretty well. Like these speakers fly out on hinges like here, It's a nice reassuring snap. We got buttons up here for power, Bluetooth connection, volume up and down, I assume, pause, play, and mode buttons, which probably enables that 3D mode. We've got the two, I believe these are two woofers, and then these are where the tweeters, these are the electrostatic tweeters. The woofers, as far as I can tell from the pictures, are still just a standard dynamic driver, which is probably to be expected. We got a nice rubberized bottom down here. We've got the micro USB charging port down here, and then we've got some sort of input. I'm curious if I can run a line into that. All right, well, that's about as much as I can find out about the treVolo S without listening to it, so I'm gonna spend some time listening to this thing, and I'll come back and I'll let you know. How's this thing sound? Is it worth 200 bucks? All right, let's talk about the BenQ treVolo S, which I think is a pretty handsome looking speaker. What do you think? It's pretty handsome. Look at that. It's a unique design. Unfortunately, that's probably the best thing I can say about this thing. It's not a bad speaker, but it's not super exciting. All right, let's start with the physical aspects of it. So I said it's a very handsome speaker, and it definitely is, but it's not just a handsome speaker. I think this thing, it feels like it's built pretty well. It's got some heft to it. And then you've got these speakers on these hinges, which have a nice positive action, I think. And then down here on the bottom, you've got a pretty generous rubber bottom that will hold this thing in place and also prevent this thing from, you know, vibrating and shaking on whatever surface you put this on, right? If you put this thing on a table and you're blasting music loud, the last thing you want is this thing vibrating on the speaker and causing a bunch of rattling noises. And with this thick rubber bottom, you don't have that problem. Now in terms of general functionality, we got some pretty good things going for us. Generally, the Bluetooth on this thing is pretty strong. It was a nice and easy pair. And then the Bluetooth connection range was pretty solid. Not excellent, but it was very solid. No complaints with the connection range. And I did also find that it seemed like this thing will do multi-point pairing. So if you want to have this thing connected to multiple devices, you can do that at the same time. Now it's not gonna be able to play music out of both devices at the same time. It's gonna pick one, and multi-point with Bluetooth gets a little bit clumsy, but I do think that is a cool feature that this thing appears to support. Other things that it supports, well, it's got a line in on the back, and I did use that to run my Walkman into this and evaluate the sound quality out of it. So line in works. It does also have a USB DAC function, which is actually kind of a pretty interesting feature that if you wanted to, you could use this as a speaker system for your computer and just run USB directly into it. I didn't play with that because frankly, I wasn't impressed enough with the sound that I was that interested in it, but I think that's a pretty cool feature. You got buttons up here on the top for pretty much all your basic functionality that you would need. My only issue with the buttons is that at maximum volume, this thing, it'll like interrupt the audio. It doesn't seem to beep. Maybe it's beeping, but it's beeping at a low enough volume that I can't hear it over the max volume playback. Why that's important is that in my experience, this thing doesn't get that loud. So I think you're gonna end up running into that max volume indicator pretty often. And then kind of a nitpick that I've got is that it doesn't remember the volume when you turn it off and turn it back on. It'll reset the volume. So if you always want this thing at max volume, every time you turn this thing off and back on again, you're gonna have to hammer that volume up button, and you're going to inevitably run into that issue where once you hit max volume, it interrupts your playback slightly. It's a minor quibble, but it's one of those things that bugs me. One interesting thing to point out is that there is an app, an official app from BenQ that's available in the App Store. I downloaded it on my phone, and I was curious to see what kind of functionality you get access to with an app. And I was frankly kind of confused because up here there is a button to change the sound modes. And as far as I can tell, the only thing the app does is it presses this button for you. So if you don't want to actually physically press this button, you can download that app and then you can just press the button in the app instead. Would you want to do that? I don't know. The one really positive thing I can definitely say about this though is the battery life at 18 hours. Now I didn't actually test it to 18 hours of battery life, but if this thing lives up to 18 hours battery life, that's pretty good for a speaker that makes this much noise. Now let's talk about the sound quality, which is where, I don't know, I felt like I was gonna be kind of impressed with the treVolo S, and frankly, I came away not super impressed. Generally, I would say the sound signature on this thing is pretty flat, pretty neutral, which is, it's a little bit special, I guess, for, you know, this sort of device. Most Bluetooth speakers like this are gonna go for a pretty consumer-friendly V-shaped sound where you've got elevated bass and elevated treble. Makes it, you know, gives it a pretty dynamic sound. And this, it doesn't, this is not a V-sounding speaker. This is a pretty flat-sounding speaker. Unfortunately, I feel like it just kind of comes across as a little bit dull and a little bit small. Like this speaker, it is a small speaker, but you kind of hope that it sounds bigger than it looks. Unfortunately, in my experience, it sounds about as small as it looks, maybe even a little bit smaller. So that flat sound signature does give you pretty present mid-range, and there's decent bass there. It's not big thump, but it's pretty decent thump that will, you know, fill up a room pretty well, decently well at least. The treble energy is definitely not sparkly. It's pretty relaxed treble. And surprisingly, even, you know, with the test sampled tracks that BenQ provided me, at maximum volume, this thing started to distort, and it wasn't the bass that was distorting. It was sort of the upper range of the sound frequency spectrum that was causing issues with this thing. And that was just at max volume, so take that with a grain of salt. But yeah, generally, like, it just doesn't sound that big. Now, this thing does have a 3D sound mode, which this button enables. And the effect of that 3D sound is it seems to increase the energy of the upper mids and the treble, which has the effect actually of making this feel like a little bit bigger of a speaker. Like, it just sounds like the sound stage kind of increases a little bit. And then you can also, you can see, you know, you can have these speaker grills facing flat forward, but I found that if you tilt them out like this, it does seem to, again, increase the size of the sound stage a little bit. Never really ever feels that big, but those are definitely things that you can do to optimize the fullness and the size and the sense of space that this speaker can give. One other thing worth calling out, and I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but this thing doesn't really get that loud. I had it at max volume. Oh, also worth pointing out is that the volume on this is not synchronized with my iPhone. So if I want this thing to be at max volume, I have to max out the volume here on the speaker, and then I can max out the volume on my iPhone separately. Even with both of those engaged to full maximum volume, it doesn't get that loud. It gets plenty loud, frankly, for most use cases, but if you plan on using this as like an outdoor speaker, I don't know that it's gonna get loud enough for like a party environment. Compared to something like the Sony SRS X55, did I get that right? Yeah, I got that right. The SRS X55 is another Bluetooth speaker that I've got just handy, and it's about the same size as this. I actually don't know how much it costs normally. I definitely didn't pay 200 bucks for it, but that thing gets louder, and generally that's got, you know, the V signature that I talked about in the sound, but in my opinion, it does have the effect of it just feeling a little bit more dynamic and more engaging, frankly. If I were to rate the BenQ treVolo S out of 5 stars, I'd give it 3 stars out of 5. I think this thing's really well built. I love the 18 hours of battery life. Don't really love the sound. I mean, if you're really looking for a Bluetooth speaker with a flat sound signature, this might be what you're looking for. I just generally don't think it's that engaging of a sound, and for 200 bucks, I feel like 200 bucks is asking a lot. That said, if you're interested in checking out the BenQ treVolo S, of course, I got links in the description down below. While you're down there, you can hit the like button for the video if you liked it. You can subscribe to the channel, and then I'll see you in the next super review.